The retired police dog had attacked every person who came near his kennel, until a blind Marine stepped into the hallway and whispered one sentence no one expected. The warning siren echoed through the animal shelter just after 7:12 on a freezing January morning in Cedar Falls, Iowa. Metal doors slammed shut one after another. Volunteers backed away so fast their boots squeaked against the polished concrete floor. Nervous whispers moved down the corridor like cold wind slipping through dead trees. Near the far kennels, a German shepherd was growling again. Low, deep, the kind of sound people felt in their ribs before they heard it with their ears. Rex, former K-9 Unit 14, 8 years old, retired police dog. 3 handlers injured in 6 months. 1 adoption attempt failed in less than a day. 2 trainers had refused to work with him again. No one at the shelter called him by his real name anymore. They called him Devil. Rex sat inside a reinforced steel enclosure near the end of the hallway beneath flickering fluorescent lights. His sable coat looked almost black in the dimness, thick around the neck, scarred along the shoulders from years of police work. One ear carried a jagged notch near the tip. His amber eyes never rested. They tracked every movement, every breath, every shift of weight, every ounce of fear. A red warning sign hung beside the kennel. Do not approach without staff clearance. Yet Rex was not barking at the frightened shelter workers rushing away from him. He was staring past them, toward the front entrance. Snow blew sideways outside the glass doors, carried by a bitter Midwest wind that rattled the frame every few seconds. Then the doors opened. A man stepped inside with a white mobility cane tapping gently across the tile. The lobby fell quiet. Daniel Hayes paused just inside the entrance as melting snow dripped from the shoulders of his dark olive coat. He was tall, broad through the chest despite the weight life had carved off him. Early 40s. Short brown hair touched with gray at the temples. A trimmed beard shadowed a jawline roughened by winter air and sleepless nights. A faded Marine Corps cap sat low over eyes that no longer saw the world beneath it. His left hand held the cane. His right hand rested near his side, scarred and weathered like old leather. Beneath the sleeve of his coat, ink curled down his forearm, the outline of a German shepherd. The receptionist stood quickly. Sir, shelter visits are suspended right now. Daniel turned his head slightly toward her voice. Calm. Steady. I got your call about the retired police dog. Somewhere behind the steel kennel door, Rex growled again. Louder this time. The receptionist swallowed. Maybe today isn't the best time. A young volunteer hurried forward. That dog attacked a trainer yesterday. Daniel gave the faintest nod. Usually means he's scared. The hallway went still. Even the fluorescent hum seemed quieter. The shelter manager stepped between Daniel and the corridor. Mr. Hayes, I appreciate you coming, but Rex is not a normal adoption case. He lost his handler last winter during a narcotics operation outside Des Moines. Since then, he has become unpredictable. Daniel's expression did not change. He didn't become unpredictable, he said softly. He became alone. No one answered. Daniel folded his cane beside his leg and began moving down the corridor, guided by sound, memory, and the faint scrape of his boots against the concrete. 2 volunteers exchanged anxious looks behind him. One man reached toward the emergency latch beside Rex's enclosure, just in case. The closer Daniel came, the quieter Rex became. No barking, no snarling, just breathing. Heavy, focused. Snowlight filtered through the narrow windows near the ceiling, casting pale silver bars across the kennel floor. Daniel stopped 6 feet from the enclosure. Easy now, he said. His voice barely rose above the heater rattling through the vents. Rex stood motionless inside the kennel, ears forward, eyes locked. The shelter manager whispered, "Don't move closer." But Daniel tilted his head slightly, as if listening to something no one else could hear. The old Marine inhaled slowly. Disinfectant, wet fur, rust, fear. He knew those smells. He knew them from military clinics overseas, from nights beside wounded soldiers, from places where survival depended on reading silence correctly. Then Rex moved, fast enough to make 2 volunteers flinch backward. Claws scraped hard against concrete as the massive German shepherd lunged toward the front of the kennel. Someone shouted. A clipboard clattered to the floor. But Rex stopped inches from the steel bars. His growl faded into something lower. Stranger. Daniel never stepped back. Not even an inch. Instead, He slowly raised his scarred right hand toward the kennel. I know, brother, he whispered. I know what losing your partner feels like. The entire shelter froze. Rex stared at Daniel's forearm, at the tattoo beneath the sleeve. A German shepherd. And below it, old military lettering. Semper Fidelis. Always faithful. The dog's breathing changed first. Slower. Uneven. Confused. His ears twitched once. Then, for the first time in nearly 2 years, the retired police K9 stopped growling completely. Silence spread through the hallway like snowfall settling over an empty field. Daniel stood beneath the cold fluorescent lights while the dog pressed closer to the bars, lowering his massive head inch by inch until his nose touched the Marine's trembling hand. And inside that frozen shelter hallway, 2 broken warriors recognized each other in the dark. Nobody moved for several seconds. The old heating vents rattled overhead. Snow tapped against the narrow windows. Somewhere farther down the hall, a small terrier barked twice before falling silent again, as if even the other dogs understood something had shifted. Rex remained close enough for his warm breath to drift across Daniel's knuckles. His amber eyes no longer looked wild. They looked tired, deeply tired, like something inside him had been standing guard too long. The shelter manager finally exhaled. I have never seen him do that. Daniel kept his hand near the bars. How long has he been here? Almost 11 months. No family. The manager hesitated. No, sir. His handler was killed during an operation last winter. Rex was in the vehicle when it happened. Daniel's jaw tightened faintly. He did not ask for details. Marines learned early that grief did not need decoration. It needed silence. The manager stepped closer, lowering her voice. After that, he changed. He stopped following commands, refused food for days. Then one morning, he snapped at a trainer trying to move him. Daniel nodded once. He lost his handler. He became dangerous. No, Daniel said quietly. He became afraid of losing anyone else. The words settled heavily in the hallway. Rex slowly sat behind the gate without taking his eyes off Daniel. His ears moved each time the Marine spoke, as though he recognized something deeper than sound. Familiar calm. Familiar restraint. The kind handlers carried after years beside working dogs in places where panic got people killed. Daniel had known dogs like Rex before. Years earlier, before the explosion took his sight, he had worked alongside military dog teams overseas. He remembered the smell of sand trapped in fur after patrols, the click of claws against barracks floors at midnight, the weight of trust between a handler and an animal trained to step into danger without hesitation. Sometimes the dogs came back shaking from explosions they could not understand. Sometimes the men did too. Daniel understood both kinds of silence. The shelter manager cleared her throat. Would you like us to move him into the exercise yard? Daniel finally lowered his hand. Rex immediately stood again, watching, waiting. No fences, Daniel murmured. If he wants space, let him choose it. The manager looked uncertain. Sir, with respect, this dog has sent grown men to the hospital. Daniel gave a tired half-smile. I spent 8 years babysitting 19-year-olds with rifles. I'll take my chances. A nervous laugh escaped one of the volunteers. The tension eased only slightly. The manager unlocked the kennel carefully while 2 staff members remained ready near the emergency barrier. Metal hinges creaked as the gate opened. Nobody breathed. Rex stepped forward slowly onto the concrete floor. Up close, the German shepherd looked enormous. Nearly 90 pounds of muscle beneath dark sable, fur marked with old service scars. But there was restraint in every movement now. He circled Daniel once, silent except for the soft click of nails against the floor. Daniel stayed calm, one hand resting loosely at his side. Then Rex stopped beside him. The dog lowered his nose toward Daniel's right forearm again, tracing the faded tattoo. Daniel smiled faintly. You smelled the other dogs on me, huh? One volunteer frowned. Other dogs? Daniel nodded. Military kennels. Years ago. The hallway grew quiet again. I trained handlers before the blast took my eyesight. His voice stayed level, but something colder moved beneath it. Memory. We were outside Fallujah during a convoy escort. Roadside bomb hit the second vehicle. We lost 2 Marines and 1 dog that morning. The heater rattled overhead. Snow hissed against the windows. Daniel continued softly. That dog crawled through smoke with shrapnel in his chest just to get back to his handler. Nobody spoke. Rex leaned lightly against Daniel's leg. The Marine rested one rough hand along the side of the dog's neck, fingers sinking gently into thick fur. "Dogs don't understand medals," he whispered. "They understand loyalty." For the first time since entering the shelter, Rex closed his eyes. Only briefly, but everyone saw it. The manager stared in disbelief. He hasn't relaxed around a human being in almost a year. Daniel's expression softened. Trauma doesn't disappear because the uniform comes off. Then something shifted outside. A sharp gust slammed snow against the front windows hard enough to make the glass tremble. Rex's ears snapped upright. His body stiffened beside Daniel. The low growl returned. Not angry this time. Alert. Focused toward the lobby. Daniel felt the change through the dog's posture. "What is it, boy?" Rex took one slow step forward, eyes locked toward the front entrance where winter wind moaned through the seams. The shelter manager glanced toward the windows. Probably just the storm. But even she did not sound convinced. A second later, the front doors burst open beneath a blast of freezing wind. Snow spiraled across the tile floor as a man stumbled inside, carrying a delivery crate against his chest. He wore a heavy brown parka, dusted white with snow, and thick gloves darkened by ice melt. "Sorry," the man muttered breathlessly. "Roads are awful." The scent hit Rex. Instantly, his growl sharpened. Every volunteer stiffened. The German shepherd stepped forward slowly, body low, attention fixed entirely on the stranger near the entrance. Daniel remained still beside him, listening carefully. The delivery driver paused when he noticed the massive police dog staring directly at him. Is he supposed to be out?" Nobody answered. Rex's breathing deepened. Slow. Intentional. Daniel tilted his head slightly. Beneath the sharp smell of snow and diesel fuel came another odor, clinging faintly to the man's boots and jacket. Chemical. Metallic. Wrong. Rex took another step. The driver shifted uneasily. "Look, I just need a signature for the food shipment." His voice carried strain now. The shelter manager started forward with a clipboard. "It's okay, Rex." But the dog did not look away from the man. Daniel brushed his fingers lightly against Rex's shoulder. "What do you smell, boy?" Rex let out another low growl. The delivery driver forced a nervous laugh. "That dog doesn't like me much." Daniel inhaled slowly. His damaged eyesight had sharpened everything else over the years. Sound, breath, hesitation, tiny changes inside a person's voice. And now he heard it clearly. Fear. Not fear of a dog. Fear of being noticed. Snow hissed through the still open doorway. The man shifted the crate awkwardly against his chest. "Can somebody sign this?" Daniel spoke quietly without turning toward him. "You serve?" The question caught the man off guard. "What?" "Your boots," Daniel said. "Old desert tread pattern. Government issue." Silence flickered across the lobby. The man glanced down instinctively before forcing a shrug. "Surplus store." Rex's growl deepened. Daniel heard it. So did everyone else. The Marine's expression hardened beneath the brim of his cap. "Funny thing about working dogs," he murmured. "They remember fear better than faces." The shelter manager looked between them. "Sir." Before anyone could move, Rex stepped directly in front of Daniel, blocking him with his body. Controlled. Deliberate. Protective. The German shepherd's amber eyes never left the delivery driver. The man swallowed. "Maybe I should come back later." He turned. Too quickly toward the door. Rex barked once. Sharp enough to freeze the room. The delivery crate slipped from the man's arms and hit the tile floor with a heavy crack. Cans rolled across the lobby. A volunteer gasped. Inside the broken cardboard, beneath bags of donated dog food, sat several unlabeled containers wrapped in black plastic. The air changed instantly. The driver backed toward the doorway. "That's not mine." Nobody moved. Except Rex. The retired police dog stood completely still now. Ears forward. Body rigid with recognition. Training. Instinct. Memory. Daniel slowly rested one hand against Rex's neck. "Easy." The man's breathing became ragged. "I didn't know what was in there." The shelter manager stared down at the packages. "Call the police." One volunteer hurried toward the office. The driver looked toward the open doors and the swirling storm outside as though measuring the distance. But Rex took one calm step into the center of the lobby. Silent. Focused. Waiting. The man stopped immediately. Something about the old police dog erased whatever thought had crossed his mind. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. Only the wind outside and the distant hum of the heaters filled the silence. Then Daniel tilted his head toward the trembling stranger near the doorway. "You know," he said quietly, "he isn't angry at you." The man blinked. "What?" Daniel's hand remained steady against Rex's fur. "He's giving you a chance to stay still." The words settled heavily across the room. Snow drifted through the half-open doorway. Minutes later, red and blue police lights appeared through the storm like distant ghosts moving across the frozen parking lot. Rex never barked again. He simply stood guard beside the blind Marine beneath the cold fluorescent lights, watching the frightened man with the same calm focus he had once carried into places where danger hid behind ordinary faces. The police stayed outside the shelter for nearly an hour while snow buried the parking lot beneath a blanket of white. Emergency lights flickered across the windows. Officers spoke with the shelter manager. Volunteers made coffee with shaking hands. Inside, Rex lay quietly beside Daniel near the far kennels. Not once after the officers arrived had the shepherd shown aggression. The deputies noticed it too. One younger officer crouched several feet away and shook his head. "That dog used to work narcotics detection in Des Moines. I saw him during a warehouse sweep once. Smartest K9 I ever saw." Daniel held a paper coffee cup between both hands, letting the warmth settle into fingers stiffened by old injuries. "Dogs like him don't forget the job." The deputy glanced at Rex. Maybe he remembered it tonight. Daniel smiled faintly. Maybe he remembered who he was. Across the room, the shelter manager approached with a folder tucked beneath one arm. Her face looked exhausted, softened now by something gentler than fear. "Mr. Hayes," she said carefully, "the police confirmed the packages were narcotics hidden inside the shipment. The driver has prior arrests in Nebraska." Daniel nodded once. Rex lifted his head at the sound of her voice, but stayed calm beside the Marine's leg. "I think Rex may have saved us from something very bad tonight," she continued. Daniel reached down, scratching behind the dog's scarred ear. "He was trying to save you long before anyone listened." The woman swallowed. For a moment, she simply watched the old shepherd leaning peacefully against the blind veteran. Then she lowered the folder. "These are temporary foster placement papers. Because of his history, we can't finalize an adoption tonight. There will be a review, a home check, and liability paperwork." Daniel ran his fingers across the edge of the folder. "That sounds more like the government I remember." A volunteer laughed softly. The manager smiled. "But if you're willing, I think Rex should leave with you tonight. He needs someone trained enough to understand him. And honestly," she looked at the dog, "I think he already made the decision." Rex nudged his nose against Daniel's forearm as though confirming it. Nearly 40 minutes later, Daniel stood near the entrance fastening the buttons of his heavy coat, while volunteers gathered supplies for the trip. Snow still drifted heavily outside beneath the streetlights, turning the parking lot into a blur of silver wind and frozen pavement. Rex waited beside him, wearing a thick borrowed harness and leash donated by the shelter. The German shepherd stayed close enough that his shoulder brushed Daniel's leg every few seconds, guiding him naturally without command. The manager noticed. "He's already adjusting to your movement." Daniel tilted his head. "Working dogs read balance before eyesight. He knows I can't see the curb." The woman stared down at Rex with quiet wonder. After everything he's been through, her voice faded. Daniel understood the unfinished thought. How does something broken still choose gentleness? He had asked himself that same question many nights after the war. Sometimes the answer never came. Sometimes it arrived covered in fur and scars. A deputy offered to drive Daniel home in his patrol SUV, while another volunteer followed with Daniel's folded cane, Rex's food, and the paperwork. That detail mattered. Daniel had not driven since losing his sight. The world had taken that from him, along with faces, street signs, sunsets, and the ability to look danger directly in the eye. But it had not taken his ability to listen, or to understand a wounded dog. The storm deepened as they stepped into the frozen night. Wind swept across the lot hard enough to sting exposed skin. Powdery snow crunched beneath Daniel's boots. Rex walked carefully at his side without pulling once. Every few feet, the shepherd glanced upward toward the Marine as if checking his pace. A deputy watching from beside the patrol car muttered to his partner, "Looks like that dog found his handler again." Daniel heard the words through the wind, but said nothing. He only lowered his hand until his fingers found Rex's thick fur. "Come on, brother," he whispered. "Let's go home." The drive north took nearly an hour through roads half buried beneath drifting snow and frozen fog rolling low across the Iowa countryside. Daniel sat in the back of the sheriff's SUV while Rex rested on the floorboard beside his boots, calm but alert. Every now and then, passing headlights flashed through the window and washed across the shepherd's scarred face, illuminating the silver flecks around his muzzle and the tired intelligence behind his amber eyes. Daniel broke the silence somewhere along County Route 18. "You ever hate the quiet?" Rex flicked one ear toward him. Daniel smiled faintly. "I used to think silence meant peace." Wind buffeted the SUV hard enough to shake the frame. Turns out silence remembers things. Outside, bare trees bent beneath freezing gusts. Abandoned barns passed like dark skeletons in the snow. The farther they drove from town, the emptier the world became. Daniel lived nearly 15 miles outside Cedar Falls near the edge of an old farming community, slowly disappearing one winter at a time. Most people his age had moved closer to the city. Better hospitals, better roads, better lives. Daniel stayed because quiet places asked fewer questions. His trailer appeared at the end of a narrow gravel road hidden behind dead cornfields and leaning cedar fences. A single porch light glowed weakly through the storm. Rust stained the metal siding beneath the windows. One section of skirting sagged near the foundation. Wind chimes made from spent rifle casings clicked softly beneath the porch roof. The deputy helped Daniel out, then stood back as Rex immediately moved to his side. The shepherd circled the porch once, nose low, scanning shadows and sniffing beneath the steps before returning to Daniel. Protective already. Daniel climbed the creaking wooden steps slowly with one hand on the railing worn smooth by years of winter storms. His keys jingled in gloved fingers before the door opened with a long groan of old hinges. Warmth did not greet them, only stillness. The trailer smelled faintly of coffee grounds, old books, pine cleaner, and loneliness. Daniel reached along the wall until his fingers found the lamp switch. A soft amber glow filled the small living room. Rex stepped inside cautiously. The trailer was modest even by rural Iowa standards. One worn couch beneath a folded army blanket. A small kitchen with chipped countertops. Framed Marine Corps photographs hanging crooked near the hallway. A dusty bookshelf filled with dog training manuals and faded paperbacks. Near the far wall sat an old wooden table holding pill bottles, unopened. Mail and a silver picture frame turned face down. Daniel removed his coat and hung it beside the door. "Not much to look at," he said quietly. Rex ignored the room. Instead, the shepherd moved directly toward Daniel and sat beside him near the couch, as if he had already chosen his post. The Marine laughed under his breath. "Guess you're not picky." Snow tapped gently against the windows while the trailer settled around them with tiny groans from cold pipes and shifting wood. The deputy left after making sure the power and heat still worked. His cruiser lights disappeared down the gravel road, swallowed by snow and darkness. For the first time, Daniel and Rex were alone. Daniel walked carefully toward the kitchen, using touch and memory rather than sight. He opened a cabinet, found an old saucepan, and filled it with water from the sink. "You hungry?" Rex stood instantly. "Yeah, thought so." Daniel found canned stew for himself and leftover cooked chicken from the refrigerator for the dog. Nothing fancy. Just survival meals from a man long accustomed to eating alone. The can opener echoed softly through the kitchen while Rex stayed close enough that Daniel could feel his warm breath whenever he reached downward. He finally placed the bowl on the floor. "Go ahead, brother." Rex stared at the food but did not eat. He looked up at Daniel first. Waiting. Permission. Habit drilled into him from years beside handlers. Daniel's expression softened in the kitchen light. "At ease, Marine." Only then did Rex lower his head and begin eating. Daniel leaned against the counter, listening to the soft sounds of claws against linoleum and breath near the bowl. Something inside his chest loosened for the first time in years. Not healed, just quieter. Later that night, after the dishes were rinsed and the storm deepened outside, Daniel sat on the couch with one hand around a coffee mug gone cold. The lamp beside him cast long shadows across the trailer while an old country station whispered through a dusty radio near the kitchen. Rex lay stretched across the rug nearby. Every time Daniel shifted, the shepherd's ears twitched awake. Watchful. Ready. Daniel finally exhaled into the silence. "You know what the funny part is?" Rex lifted his head. Snow hissed softly against the windows. Daniel stared blindly toward the storm beyond the trailer walls. Everybody thinks I rescued you tonight. Rex remained still. Daniel's voice lowered. Truth is, I think maybe you found me first. The first nightmare came 3 nights later, just after 2:17 in the morning, while freezing rain rattled softly against the trailer roof and wind pushed cold air through the old window seams. Daniel jerked awake with a strangled gasp, tangled in his blankets, chest heaving beneath a sweat-soaked gray t-shirt. Somewhere deep inside the darkness of his mind, the desert was still burning. Smoke. Radio screaming. Sand whipped through the night by rotor wash. Men shouting names he had not spoken aloud in years. His right hand clawed instinctively toward the nightstand, searching for something that was no longer there. A rifle. A flashlight. A way back to control. Instead, his shaking fingers struck a pill bottle and knocked it onto the floor with a hollow plastic rattle. Instantly, Rex was on his feet. The German Shepherd crossed the narrow bedroom in less than 2 seconds, claws sliding against the worn wood floor before stopping beside the bed. Daniel inhaled sharply, still trapped somewhere between Iowa winter and Fallujah fire. No. Rex pressed his nose firmly against the Marine's forearm, grounding him, anchoring him. Daniel's breathing stayed ragged for several moments before slowly easing beneath the steady weight of warm fur against his side. The room smelled faintly of rainwater, old cedar, and panic sweat cooling in the dark. Finally, Daniel lowered his trembling hand onto Rex's neck. Sorry, brother. The dog stayed there until the shaking stopped. After that night, Rex never slept far from the bedroom door again. Days settled into quiet routines. Mornings began with stale coffee brewing in the kitchen, while local farm reports crackled from the radio beside the sink. Daniel would stand near the counter in flannel shirts and worn jeans, while Rex lay nearby watching every movement with patient focus. Outside, winter stretched endlessly across the frozen Iowa fields. Snowbanks rose high along the gravel road. Bare branches scratched against power lines. Most days nobody came by except the occasional propane delivery truck or Sheriff Tomlin checking roads after storms. Daniel preferred it that way. Crowds exhausted him. Noise stayed too long inside his head. But Rex slowly changed the silence inside the trailer. Not loudly. Not all at once. Small things. The sound of claws following Daniel room to room. Heavy breathing beside the couch at night. A warm body blocking cold drafts beneath the kitchen table. Companionship returned quietly, like sunrise slipping beneath curtains. One afternoon nearly 2 weeks after the shelter incident, Daniel sat repairing an old battery-powered radio near the living room window while sleet tapped steadily against the glass. Rex lay nearby chewing on a thick rubber training toy donated by the shelter. The trailer smelled of solder smoke, coffee grounds, and wet wool drying near the heater vent. Then the shepherd froze. The toy rolled from his mouth. His ears lifted toward the back hallway. Daniel heard the shift immediately. What is it? Rex stood. No barking. No growling. Just focus. The dog walked toward the narrow hallway leading to the utility room near the rear of the trailer. Daniel set down the screwdriver and listened. At first he heard nothing except rain ticking against metal siding. Then came a faint sound beneath the floorboards. Crack. Soft. Distant. Like wood shifting under pressure. Rex's body stiffened hard enough that the tags on his borrowed harness jingled. The shepherd lowered his nose toward the floor near the hallway entrance and released a low warning rumble. Daniel frowned. Rex. The dog pawed sharply once against the floorboards. Then again. Harder. Daniel rose carefully from the couch, fingertips tracing the wall as he moved. Easy now. But Rex stepped sideways directly into his path, blocking him. The Marine stopped immediately. Working dogs did not block movement without reason. Another faint crack came from beneath the trailer, this time accompanied by the unmistakable smell of something burning. Electrical. Hot plastic. Daniel's face tightened. Damn. He reached toward the wall outlet beside the hallway and pulled back from the heat radiating through the cover. Somewhere beneath the utility room floor, faulty wiring had begun overheating inside the old trailer walls. Rex barked once. Not panic. Command. Daniel moved fast despite the blindness. Years of military drills still lived in muscle memory. Breaker box, he muttered. Rex was already moving. The German shepherd darted down the hallway, stopped near the utility closet, then barked again. Daniel followed the sound quickly, one hand sliding along the wall. The smell of melting insulation grew stronger. Dangerous. Hidden fire inside old trailer wiring could spread fast in winter. Daniel reached the utility closet and found the metal breaker panel by touch. His fingers shook slightly while searching the switches. Rex pressed against his leg, guiding him closer. Then came another sharp crack from inside the wall. Daniel slammed the main breaker down. The trailer fell silent. The refrigerator hum vanished. The heater died. Lights disappeared into darkness he already lived inside. Only rain remained, tapping softly against the roof. For several long seconds, neither man nor dog moved. Then the smell of burning slowly faded. Daniel exhaled shakily in the dark utility room while Rex leaned against his knee. "You smelled it before I did." The shepherd remained still beneath his hand. Outside, thunder rolled low across the frozen Iowa sky. Daniel swallowed hard, suddenly aware how close the danger had been. Alone, asleep, blind inside an old trailer with faulty wiring. He rested his forehead briefly against Rex's neck. "You saved my life again, didn't you?" Rex gave the faintest rumble deep in his chest. Not aggressive, almost gentle, like a soldier answering roll call. By the following Friday, the storm system had moved east, leaving behind a brittle cold that settled over the countryside like glass. Snow covered the fields around Daniel's trailer in long, untouched sheets broken only by fence posts and deer tracks cutting through the drifts. The electrician had come and gone 2 days earlier, replacing melted wiring beneath the utility room while muttering about how close the old place had come to catching fire. Daniel listened politely from the kitchen table while Rex watched the stranger every second he remained inside the trailer. The shepherd never growled, never barked, but his eyes followed every movement with the quiet intensity of a sentry on watch. The electrician noticed. "That dog doesn't trust easy." Daniel wrapped both hands around a chipped coffee mug. "Neither do Marines." The man laughed softly. Rex did not. After the truck disappeared down the gravel road, the trailer returned to silence. Before Rex, that silence had felt hollow, endless, like standing inside a church after everyone had gone home. Now it carried weight, presence, life breathing nearby. That evening, Daniel sat near the kitchen counter sorting canned food supplies by touch, while a portable radio whispered weather updates from Cedar Falls. Temperatures expected to drop below zero overnight. Wind advisory in effect until morning. Rex lay stretched beside the front door with his head resting across his paws. Then suddenly the shepherd lifted his head, ears forward. Daniel stopped moving. "What is it?" Rex stood slowly. The dog turned toward the front windows where darkness pressed against the glass beyond the porch light. No barking, just focus. Daniel listened. At first there was only wind moving through the dead cornfields. Then came another sound. Tires. Gravel crunching slowly somewhere down the road. Too late for visitors. Rex moved toward the door in silence. The low rumble beginning in his chest felt different this time. Sharper. Daniel rose from the kitchen counter, setting aside the canned goods. Somebody coming. A truck engine idled outside, then shut off. Doors opened. Footsteps followed. More than one person. Slow. Heavy. Snow compressed beneath boots moving toward the trailer. Daniel's jaw tightened. He had lived alone long enough to recognize when footsteps carried purpose instead of accident. Rex positioned himself directly between Daniel and the front entrance without command. The old Marine reached toward the countertop, where his phone rested near the microwave. Signal out here was unreliable in storms, but habit mattered. Outside, voices murmured beneath the wind. Young men. Nervous. One laugh drifted briefly through the darkness before stopping. Rex's growl deepened. The porch steps creaked. Then came 3 hard knocks against the trailer door. Daniel remained still. "Who is it?" Silence answered first. Then a male voice called through the cold. "Car trouble, sir. Wondering if we could use your phone." Daniel listened carefully. The voice sounded too rehearsed, too quick, and Rex already knew something was wrong. The shepherd's body had gone rigid beside the door. Daniel lowered his voice toward the dog. "Easy." Another knock came louder. "Please, man. It's freezing out here." The old Marine moved one hand along the counter until his fingers brushed the flashlight beside the sink. Reflex from another life. Rex released a sharp bark. Warning. Immediate. Daniel froze. The dog never barked without reason. Then came a faint metallic sound outside, near the porch railing. something scraping lightly against metal. One of the men whispered harshly, "Hurry up." Daniel's face hardened. Not stranded travelers. Something else. The shepherd suddenly lunged toward the door hard enough to rattle the hinges. His growl exploded through the trailer with enough force to stop the voices outside cold. Silence swallowed the porch. Daniel reached for the phone while backing toward the hallway. Rex. The dog remained planted at the entrance like a living barricade. Another quiet sound drifted from outside. Footsteps repositioning near the windows. Snow crunching carefully beneath boots. Daniel's pulse slowed instead of quickening. Training returned. Breathe. Listen. Orient. The radio crackled beneath weather static. Cold air seeped through the trailer seams. Then a loud bang struck the side of the trailer near the kitchen window. Rex spun toward the sound. Another impact followed near the utility room wall. Testing. Looking for weakness. Daniel managed to force enough signal onto the phone to reach the sheriff's office. "This is Daniel Hayes on County Route 18, he said low and steady. "I think I have trouble outside." The dispatcher's voice faded in and out through static. "Units are 20 minutes. Out due to road conditions. 20 minutes. Outside." Footsteps circled slowly through the snow again. Daniel lowered the phone carefully while Rex stood rigid near the hallway entrance, tracking movement beyond the walls with terrifying precision. Then the shepherd turned toward the back of the trailer and released the deepest growl Daniel had heard since the shelter. Someone was no longer standing outside. Someone was trying to get in. The trailer seemed to shrink around them as wind pushed harder against the walls. Footsteps circled through the snow like wolves testing a fence line. Daniel stood near the hallway gripping the phone while static crackled from the dispatcher, still connected on speaker. "Stay inside, Mr. Hayes," the dispatcher repeated. "Deputies are en route." Rex did not move. The retired police dog remained fixed toward the rear of the trailer, body low, ears forward, every muscle locked with focus. Another scraping sound drifted from the utility room wall. Closer this time. Daniel's heartbeat slowed. Combat had taught him something strange. Fear screamed. Training whispered. He listened to the whisper. Outside, one man muttered something sharp beneath the wind. Another answered from farther away near the truck. Daniel counted at least 3 voices. Young, nervous, reckless enough to mistake blindness for weakness. Rex barked once. Sharp and explosive. Then came the sound of metal shifting near the back entrance. The old trailer door rattled hard against its frame. Someone had forced it halfway open before stopping. Cold air flooded the hallway, carrying snowflakes and the bitter scent of diesel fuel, cigarettes, and panic sweat. Rex moved before Daniel spoke. The shepherd surged down the hallway with the speed of instinct returning home. A startled shout erupted outside. Heavy boots stumbled backward through snow. Daniel heard scrambling movement near the utility steps, followed by another frightened yell from the side yard. Rex did not chase far. He held the doorway, guarding. Daniel knew the posture without seeing it. A working dog defending territory did not waste movement. The dispatcher's voice crackled. "Mr. Hayes, are you safe?" Daniel exhaled. For now. Wind howled through the half-open back door. Then another sound reached him beneath the storm. A vehicle engine turning over hard. Tires spinning helplessly against ice. One of the men cursed. Their truck was stuck near the ditch line. Daniel moved carefully toward the hallway, one hand along the wall. Rex. Instantly, the German shepherd reappeared inside the trailer through the rear doorway, snow dusting his fur and steam rising from his breath. He stopped beside Daniel. Calm. Controlled. Not wild. Never wild. Another desperate attempt to free the truck echoed from outside as tires whined against frozen gravel. Red and blue lights finally appeared faintly through the storm beyond the front windows. Distant but growing closer. One of the men outside saw them too. Cops. Panic carried clearly through the wind. Daniel rested one hand against Rex's neck while both listened to the scrambling retreat beyond the trailer walls. Doors slammed. The engine roared again. The truck finally broke free down the road, fishtailing into the snowy darkness just as 2 sheriff cruisers turned onto County Route 18. Flashing lights painted the snowfields in red and blue while deputies hurried through knee-deep drifts toward the trailer. Rex remained perfectly still beside Daniel. Deputy Tomlin entered first, breath steaming beneath his winter collar. "You all right?" Daniel nodded once. "We're fine." The deputy's flashlight swept toward the back hallway where deep boot prints tracked through snow blowing across the utility steps. Then the beam landed on Rex. The large shepherd stood silently beside the Marine, amber eyes steady beneath the flickering lights. That dog stopped them? Daniel gave a tired smile. He convinced them to rethink their evening. One deputy examined tire marks near the ditch, while another radioed vehicle descriptions to dispatch. The storm swallowed most of the evidence quickly beneath fresh snowfall. But inside the trailer, something else remained. Respect. Deputy Tomlin crouched slightly near Rex, not close enough to challenge him. He could have hurt somebody tonight. Daniel shook his head slowly. No, he protected somebody tonight. The deputy looked toward the shepherd again. Funny thing is, the county has heard stories about this dog for months. Dangerous, unstable, unadoptable. Rex stood beside the blind Marine like a statue carved from winter shadow. Daniel's voice lowered. Sometimes grief sounds dangerous to people who have never carried it. Silence settled heavily inside the trailer. The deputies finished their reports near midnight, while wind rattled ice against the siding. Eventually, the cruisers disappeared back into the frozen darkness until only the storm remained. Daniel secured the damaged back door with an old wooden chair wedged beneath the handle before sinking onto the couch. Exhaustion came now that the adrenaline had faded. Rex approached quietly and rested his head against the Marine's knee. Daniel lowered one rough hand into the thick fur along the dog's neck. Neither moved for a long time. Snow drifted against the windows while the radio whispered static near the kitchen. Then Daniel finally spoke. You know what scares me most? Rex lifted his ears slightly. The Marine stared sightlessly toward the dark hallway where danger had stood minutes earlier. Not the men outside. His fingers tightened gently in the shepherd's fur. It's how close I came to believing I could survive this world alone. Rex pressed closer without making a sound. And somewhere beneath the storm and silence, Daniel realized the retired police dog was no longer guarding only the trailer. He was guarding what remained of Daniel's heart. Winter loosened its grip slowly after that night. February snowbanks melted inch by inch beneath pale Iowa sunlight. Muddy gravel roads reappeared across the countryside like old scars surfacing through skin. Life around the trailer settled into something quieter, safer. Sheriff patrols passed more often along County Route 18 after the attempted break-in, though nobody ever caught the young men who fled into the storm. Daniel did not seem interested in revenge. Some wounds exhausted a man long before anger could reach them. Instead, mornings became simple again. Coffee before sunrise. Rex waiting beside the porch steps while Daniel listened to weather reports on the kitchen radio. The old Marine began sleeping better too. Not perfectly. Some nights the war still returned in fragments of smoke and distant screams. But now, whenever panic clawed its way out of the darkness, there was always a warm weight pressed against the side of the bed before the nightmare could fully consume him. Rex never failed. Not once. One cold Sunday morning, near the beginning of March, Daniel sat outside on the trailer porch wrapped in a heavy flannel jacket while melting snow dripped from the roof into muddy puddles below. The sky hung low and silver across the empty fields. Somewhere far off, geese called on their way north. Rex lay beside the porch steps watching the horizon with calm alertness, ears twitching whenever wind carried distant sounds across the farmland. Daniel held a small package in his lap. Brown paper, old twine. He had spent 3 days working on it alone at the kitchen table. Slowly, the Marine reached down until his fingers found the shepherd's thick fur. Got something for you, brother. Rex lifted his head. Daniel smiled and untied the package by touch. Inside rested a new leather collar. Dark brown, hand-stitched. Simple except for one small silver plate fastened near the buckle. Daniel's rough fingers traced the engraving before his throat tightened. Retired K-9 Officer Rex Hayes, he murmured. Family. Wind brushed through the cedar trees near the road while the dog sat calmly beside him. Daniel fastened the collar around Rex's neck, fingers lingering against the worn fur beneath it. For a moment, neither moved. Then Rex leaned forward and rested his heavy head against the Marine's chest. Daniel laughed quietly, though emotion thickened his voice. You always did know when somebody needed saving. The trailer screen door creaked behind them. Sheriff Tomlin stepped onto the porch carrying a white bakery box under one arm and a folded newspaper beneath the other. Hope I'm not interrupting. Daniel tilted his head toward the familiar boots. Only a promotion ceremony. The sheriff chuckled and set the bakery box on the porch railing. Brought pie. Rex sniffed the air instantly. Traitor, Daniel muttered. The sheriff settled beside them, looking out across the thawing fields. For a while none of them spoke. Wind chimes made from old rifle casings clicked softly overhead, while sunlight fought through the clouds in pale golden streaks. Finally, Sheriff Tomlin unfolded the newspaper. Thought you should hear this. Daniel turned slightly. The sheriff cleared his throat. Local hero retired police dog helps prevent narcotics trafficking at Cedar Falls Animal Shelter. Former Marine credits K9 with saving lives. Daniel groaned. I told those reporters to leave us alone. Too late now. The sheriff smiled. County folks have been dropping off dog treats at my office all week. Rex thumped his tail once against the porch boards at the word treats. Daniel shook his head. Great. He's going to develop an ego. But beneath the dry humor lived something warmer now. Peace. Not perfect peace. People rarely receive that much. But enough. Enough to breathe easier when the sun came up. Enough to stop fearing the silence. The sheriff folded the paper slowly. You know, most people around here spent months calling that dog dangerous. Daniel rested one hand along Rex's neck where the new collar caught the morning light. They were wrong. Yeah, the sheriff said. Seems like he was protecting people all along. Daniel fell silent. Somewhere across the fields, a church bell rang faintly through the cold morning air. Rex lifted his head toward the sound while sunlight broke fully through the clouds, warming the porch in pale gold. The old Marine leaned back in his chair, blind eyes turned toward a sun he could no longer see but could still feel. His weathered hand remained on the retired police dog beside him. Funny thing about darkness, Daniel whispered. You spend enough years inside it. You start believing nobody else can find their way through. Rex pressed closer against his leg. The Marine smiled softly. Turns out some souls carry the light for both of you. The wind moved gently through the empty Iowa fields while the retired police dog sat watch beside the blind veteran beneath the morning sun. And for the first time in a very long while, neither of them looked lost anymore.